The full moon in Capricorn on Friday, June 21st, brings our attention to duties and responsibilities and reminds us of the gifts of Saturn, structures and boundaries. Without them, we wouldn't achieve a thing. Let's take a closer look and break it down for all 12 signs. My name is Anastasia. I'm a traditional Western astrologer specializing in natal, relationship, and predictive readings. If you enjoy my work, please take a few seconds of your time to show your support by leaving a like or a comment, subscribing, and pressing that notification bell. If you have time to watch another one of my videos, that really helps my channel grow, makes YouTube algorithm more friendly. You have a different option of supporting me, and that is by saying thank you or buying me a coffee or tea. I appreciate that as well. Before we dive in, 2 announcements. If you want to know more about yourself, you're curious to understand what your chart means, what it has to say about your life, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. There are a few options there. I also do predictive readings, such as solar return or year ahead, and relationship readings, where we look at your compatibility with your crush, husband, wife, significant other, and break it all down. On my website, you can also find the magical candles and oils I create. For example, my all-time favorite, Moon in Cancer. This is the second edition from 2024. The 2023 one was sold out. These sell really fast always. That's why I also created Almond Moon candle, which is a bigger version of the same one. And this one just has the most soothing, comforting, gentle touch to it. It helps you relax. It makes you feel protected and cared for. It can bring ease into your life, help with sleep, emotional balance, and fertility. Especially good for people born with their natal moon in Capricorn or Scorpio, moon in the 6th, 8th, or 12th houses, which are more challenging positions. If your moon is conjoining, squaring, or opposing Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto, this is the choice for you. And honestly, my moon is in Gemini, but it's conjunct Chiron, so this is also my choice. I will stand by this candle forever and ever. And obviously every edition I make is slightly different, but it still captures that comforting, soothing version, soothing moon in Cancer. I also chose to highlight it because we're talking about the moon in Capricorn, which is all about structures and hard work and responsibility. So it helps to have a little bit of that balance. So we're coming into the full moon fresh from the sun ingressing into Cancer, right? We've had the sun in Gemini for the first 20 days of the month. It may have felt overwhelming, loud, chaotic, busy. Your social schedule could have been packed. Your mind could have been packed. And we had a little bit of frustrating transits, right? Like we started out in June pretty good with Venus Cazimi. But then Venus, Mercury, Sun all squared Saturn, and they all squared Neptune. So there could have been a sense of like too much, too loud, uncertainty, lack of clarity. And the full moon in Capricorn actually helps us bring some clarity. It helps us center, I think. And Cancer season in general feels like an emotional tonal shift. We're going from the buzzing, curious, let's do everything at once, to what do we feel like doing? What is emotionally important to us? And I think the fact that we're starting off the bat with the Capricorn full moon also suggests that not only we are driven by emotions, but we're also driven by our ambition. So we're trying to balance the two. So this full moon occurs on Friday, June 21st at 9:07 p.m. Eastern. So adjust for your time zone, right? If you are in Europe, chances are it's already June 22nd, right? Because I think, yeah, we're like 5 hours apart between Eastern time and like London time. So for you, it will be potentially June 22nd. If you're in Australia, if you're in Japan, wherever you are, let me know where you are, by the way, down below. That would be great to know where you're watching from. So 9:07 p.m. Eastern, Friday, June 21st at 1 degree 6 minutes Capricorn. So as always, especially strongly felt by those with planets, angles like your ascendant, descendant, IC, MC, between 0 and 4 degrees cardinal signs: Capricorn, Cancer, Libra, and Aries. If you have those positions, those planets in early degrees, you're likely to feel it the strongest, but we're all going to feel it on different levels. With this full moon, we're closing a cycle. New moon is always a conception, the seed being planted in the dark soil. By the time the full moon rolls around, it grows, it blooms, right? So something you have planted in January 2024 is coming full circle. We've had the new moon in January 2024. So take a look back, right? What has been, what was going on in your life? What did you start? Capricorn oftentimes is about work. It is about authority. It is about duty, leadership, right? Sort of Capricorn has this classical father, provider, hard worker type energy. So there might be a job that you've been applying for. Maybe you get it. A promotion you've been waiting for. Maybe you get it. Maybe you choose to, start a business or something. Maybe it's the time that something in terms of your power, authority, legacy is changing. Maybe you choose to step away. Maybe you choose to prioritize your family, right? And maybe you're wrapping up an important cycle at work. The full moons are always about balance, right? If you or anyone you know were born on the full moon, they naturally tend to be people who see two opposing sides of the story, right? With Cancer season, we are very emotionally driven, while Capricorn energy has that ability to put the emotion aside and focus on the duty. But without the emotion, Capricorn struggles, right? Like that's why the moon struggles in Capricorn, because too much duty is not soulful. It's not, you can't be fed by duty, right? Like, yes, ambition is great, success is great, but you need hugs, you need warmth, you need belonging. So very much trying to balance those two, right? But then you also can't be too caught up in emotions of Cancer season. It is important to have boundaries. It is important to focus on things that are priority. So very much balancing duty, recognition, ambition, status with those values of like family, nurturance, and support. And sometimes we need to let something go in order to have more balance. And other times we need to work at something harder, right? Like we need to prioritize what's important to us and dedicate more time. The full moon opposes Venus, which also suggests the mind versus your heart energy. Just a sec. So you may have to sort of deal with tension of like what needs to be done versus what you would rather do, your desires versus, once again, your duties, your needs. It is ruled by Saturn and Pisces. So the ruler being Saturn in the sign of Pisces also suggests a need to have better boundaries when it comes to our emotions, and a need to find clarity, right? In terms of what is worth your time, what is not worth your time. And maybe get more serious about your mental health, about your spirituality, figure out, like it's interesting, right? Because Capricorn is about duty and ambition, but Pisces is all about like feelings and empathy and community. So perhaps you realize at this time that your duty is not just to your boss, but it's to the world, that you have some kind of vision that needs to be achieved, that needs to be brought to life. And I really like that the full moon coincides with Mercury sextile Mars on the same day. Mercury in a sextile to Mars is very decisive, is very clear, is very action oriented, right? And direct. We're focused on problem solving. And speaking of that need for balance, right? Speaking of the need for balance between duty, hard work, and like emotions, Mars being in a sextile to both Cancer and Capricorn, trine to Capricorn, offers solutions, right? Mars is in Taurus, it trines Capricorn, sextiles Cancer. Can be the time when you are more clear in your communication, more focused on finding solutions, more focused on like figuring out better ways to manage time. Kind of, once again, don't shy away from hard work and duty and responsibility. But the most we'll find out by looking at the houses that are getting activated. If you want to know more, you want me to look at your specific chart and give you insights into what's happening for you right now or what's coming up, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. There are a few options, few sizes that will fit to every single one of you. So starting with Aries rising. If you are an Aries rising, there's a full moon in your 10th house. And the ruler is Saturn in the 12th. So this full moon completes a chapter started in January 2024. What was happening in your professional sector at that time? What was happening in terms of your ambitions and aspirations? If you have been starting a project at that time, this project might be wrapping up. You're maybe completing that project, right? If you have started looking for a job, you may find that job. If you've been looking for a promotion, this might be the time when you get that promotion. But there's some need to balance your perhaps desire for comfort, your desire for family, your desire for security with what needs to change professionally, and potentially like kind of an understanding that you need to be more structured, that you need to be more stern, that you need to be more boundaried, or maybe that you need to let something go at work, right? Like if you feel like the tension between your work life and your family life is too much, this full moon could be about letting something go. So if you feel like you really need to let go of the job or let go of some hours at your job, this might be the time to kind of pivot and reconsider. The ruler is Saturn in the 12th house, and that is of course bringing up the topics of like mental health, spirituality, self-defeating tendencies, right? Do you work too much? Do you put too much pressure on yourself? Do you work really long hours? Or the ruler being Saturn in the 12th also is suggesting that your mental health and your balance and your peace right now is so much more important than tangible goals and traditional sort of monetary fulfillment and achievement, that you are adjusting and pivoting to do something else professionally. You are maybe choosing work that is more healing to others, or the work that is healing to yourself. There's also a sextile between Mercury and Mars in the 2nd house, and Mercury is in your 10th house. So once again, some type of like desire, I think, to slow down, to work on your new values, to implement your new ideas, and very much changes to work life, finances, in order to create better balance in your life. If you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com, and let me know how this resonates. If you are a Taurus rising, there's a full moon in your 9th house, and it is ruled by Saturn in the 11th. So the ruler being Saturn in the 11th calls attention to your role in the world, to your, Saturn. That is loud. Saturn being in the 11th calls you to take responsibility for your friendships, to maybe rethink people you surround yourself with, rethink your role in the community, take more responsibility for your community, and take more responsibility for the role that you play in your social relationships, right? Saturn in the 11th could be a little bit isolating, could suggest that you're sort of taking a critical approach towards your relationships. And so the full moon in the 9th house may be driven by that, right? Like the full moon in the 9th is completing a cycle started in January 2024. Take a look back, what was happening in your house of education, travel, writing, publishing, legal matters. But there is both tangible change that is represented by this full moon, such as graduating, such as completing a course of study, like maybe some kind of philosophical, religious training you've been going through, like if you're trying to become a yoga teacher or a meditation teacher so that you can have better relationships with other people. There may be a completion of some kind of travel chapter in your life. If you've been exploring the world, the full moon in the 9th could suggest that you're coming home, so to speak. Maybe legal matters wrapping up, right? Some of your writing work getting published and becoming sort of visible to a larger community. But the full moon in the 9th can also be a sign of an ideological shift, right? Some kind of realization that you need better boundaries with your friends, that you need to maybe find people who are more It's just crazy because it's the same sound. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. But maybe you need to find people that are more spiritually aligned with you, especially if you feel like you've been going through kind of big changes. The full moon in the 9th could suggest that, you know, you have changed so much that people around you no longer reflect who you are or what you believe in. So changes in friendships are quite possible. Changes connected to you being more proactive and taking action and presenting a different version of you to the world, because Mercury in your 9th house is also sextiling Mars in the 1st at this time. So, you know, so it's very much like your role in the world is changing and your personality is like transforming to be more courageous, more proactive, and very much like even potentially being a teacher, preacher, guide, sort of connecting with community in that way. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. I'd be happy to look at your individual chart and provide more insights and answers to any questions you have. If you are a Gemini rising, this full moon happens in your 8th house, and it is ruled by Saturn in the 10th. So the full moon in the 8th house brings attention to how you relate with other people, how you exchange with other people, how in debt you are, right? And maybe some debts need to be paid off. So around this time, you may be becoming more aware of ties you have to other people, and like, once again, sort of financial dependencies you have that are holding you back, that are dragging you down. Even with the 8th house, there might be certain, you know, like debts that are more karmic, or debts that are more spiritual, sort of certain beliefs around money, around resources, around give and take dynamics that you are working on letting go. So we're talking about finances, right? Take a look back also at January 2024 when we had the new moon in Capricorn. So this is the full moon, which is, you know, completion of what got started in January. But if we're talking about actual financial debts or finances of other people represented by the 8th house, this full moon could be the time you finish paying off a debt you started working on in January. Maybe you're getting a loan or a mortgage that you've been waiting for. Maybe your kid goes to school and, you know, they sort of gave you maybe a scholarship, or you've applied for a student loan for yourself or your child, and this could be the time when you get it. Receiving an inheritance, receiving some kind of payment you've been waiting for from other people is a possibility here. But then if it is a spiritual debt, if it is sort of a soul contract or an agreement with other people, there might also be a need to break away from it, break away from an unhealthy dynamic. Maybe you have a neighbor who always stops you on the way home and asks you a ton of questions and you don't feel comfortable. So this full moon would be your invitation to set some boundaries and maybe be direct with them, but still sort of kind, and just say, I'm sorry, I'll happily talk to you, but maybe let me initiate it, or, you know, just sort of a different way of being clear and assertive. And another way this could also manifest is your partner's resources changing. The ruler is Saturn in the 10th, so I think a lot of your actions right now might be motivated by the need for more professional freedom, more professional autonomy, agency, and success maybe even, right? Or maybe like trying to figure out what you do, and so the debts you may be paying off are for the sake of that, so you can start a business or feel more professionally free, or even sort of, you know, karmic agreements can be dedicated towards kind of freeing yourself from responsibilities you have to someone so that you can go your own way professionally. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Moving on to the lovely Cancer rising. For you, the full moon happens in the 7th house, which is the realm of relationships, and it is ruled by Saturn in the 9th. So the full moon in the 7th brings completion to a romantic chapter started in January 2024. take a look back. We had the new moon in Capricorn in January, and maybe you started a new relationship. Maybe you moved in with your significant other. Maybe you got engaged. And so this full moon can be the time to commit or to walk away. If you feel like the relationship has run its course, and a relationship could be romantic or it could be any other kind of relationship, right? Maybe it's time to step away. Maybe it's time to say goodbye. Maybe it's time to set better boundaries in place. If you feel like, you have a sibling who has been living on your couch for the last 2 years, and it was supposed to be 1 month, it turned into 2 years. Maybe it's time to have an honest conversation and to say that, hey, I'm happy to help you. Can I be of service and helping you find an apartment? But just sort of be clear, right? Be that Capricorn, sort of serious about it. Or maybe it's the time when you're signing some kind of contract or you're committing to a relationship that got started in January, whether by getting married or moving in with your significant other, or maybe you're even opening a joint bank account or something, which could also be a sign for Gemini risings, but also for Cancer risings. The fact that Saturn is the ruler and Saturn is in the 9th house, to me, is also suggesting that the relationship changes could be inspired by some kind of legal matter that is happening, right? Once again, so if you're engaging or you're getting engaged or getting married, that's a sign of a legal status. There might be changes connected to travel. Maybe you're moving or traveling or starting studies in a foreign land, and so relationship needs to transform in the process. Maybe you are writing, right? Maybe you're sort of getting an offer to write a novel about like a foreign country, and so you're traveling there and you're deciding whether your partner can come with you or not. Mercury in your 7th house is also sextiling Mars in the 11th, which could suggest that if you're feeling a little bit stuck or lost, reach out to friends, consult someone on social media. There might be help in the shape of alliances, associates that is coming your way. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more about your chart, about your year coming up, or your relationship, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. If you are a Leo rising, there's a full moon in your 6th house, and the ruler is Saturn in the 8th house. So the full moon in the 6th house brings a completion of a chapter in health, work, service that got started in January 2024 when we had the new moon in Capricorn in your 6th house. Definitely worth taking a look back and thinking of what you were starting at that time, what was happening in your life that is coming a full circle right now. Some of the manifestations of this full moon could be connected to kicking a bad habit to the curb, getting over a health issue. Maybe over the course of the last 6 months, you've addressed certain health concerns, or you've worked on building a better diet or building a better exercise routine. And so this full moon can literally be about celebrating how far you've come and how much you've accomplished. If you feel like there's a need for better boundaries at work, or better boundaries around health, around your commitment to helping others, this is very much the time to address those, kind of implement those boundaries, make those changes that need to happen in order for you to have a better balance in your life. But also with like the Sun, Venus, Mercury all in the 12th house, your soul craves an escape. It craves sort of a break, and needing to find that balance between like peace and quiet and the duties you have, and figuring out where you need to double down and get more serious versus where do you need to step away and maybe something you need to set down, right, in order to have better balance in your life. And Saturn in the 8th is, of course, bringing attention to your finances. So maybe some of your concerns, some of your actions are driven by the financial concerns, the debts you're paying off, or, even debts and agreements you have with other people that you're working towards resolving can be brought up to your attention right now as well. I do like that Mercury in the 6th house is sextiling Mars in the 10th, which reads as like decisive professional action, and it could be quite supportive around now. Let me know how this resonates. What do you think this is about? What was happening in January for you? And if you're curious for more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. For the lovely Virgo risings, there's a full moon in your 5th house with the ruler Saturn being in the 7th house. So the full moon in the 5th completes a chapter in relationships, in romantic relationships, in parenthood, in the life of your child, in your self-expression that got started in January 2024. We had a new moon in Capricorn in January, and so at this point we're coming full circle. So for some of you, this could be a change in your love life. The ruler is Saturn in the 7th, right? The ruler being Saturn in the 7th represents that your relationship sector could have felt a little bit heavier. There could have been, either because of you going through something or you needing to have better boundaries in love, or your partner going through something. So if there is a need for better boundaries and more seriousness, this full moon could be a sign of having serious conversations about relationships, right? Talking about your needs, talking about your desires, trying to get on the same page, establishing better structures, better rules around parenthood, potentially. If you feel like you've been the one sort of carrying most of the weight, right? You're maybe kind of shifting things around in your relationship. 5th house represents children, so pregnancy or giving birth is another possibility. That would definitely be, I think, the full moon, right? Completing a major chapter in terms of parenthood. Maybe, something is happening with your child where you need to have a talk with them and come to an agreement, come to some kind of understanding. 5th house also represents self-expression and pleasure. So with the full moon in the 5th house, with the full moon here, you're maybe needing to have better boundaries around pleasure, whether that means allowing yourself to have more fun, or perhaps letting go of a bad habit, or getting more serious about what you want to do and what brings you joy, because sometimes you have to advocate for yourself and you have to dedicate your attention towards things that are important. Mercury in your 5th house at the time of the full moon sextiles Mars in the 9th, connecting your pleasure with education, writing, travel, foreign lands, foreign people, and writing, publishing, if I haven't said so already. So changes, transformations might also be connected to you moving, to maybe you taking on a role of an educator, to you being interested in a foreigner and perhaps moving with them. So very tightly connected those two are. I feel like that sounded like what a Yoda might say. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, AnastasiaDoesAstrology.com. Now, if you are the beautiful Libra rising, there's a full moon in your 4th house, and it is ruled by Saturn in the 6th. So full moon in the 4th is completion of a chapter started in January 2024. Take a look back. That's when we had the new moon in Capricorn. Always represents new beginnings. And the completion relates to home, family, real estate, living situation. So what could this be? This could suggest that you're moving. This could suggest that you are applying new rules, new laws in your family. Maybe you're needing to be more structured, needing to set some boundaries between family members, needing to sort of figure things out in the familial dynamic. You're maybe finishing a renovation project, finishing a home project, right? Maybe there is something that you've been postponing, and the full moon like literally brings attention to that. With the fact that the sun is in the 10th, and a lot of your focus could be on your work life right now, I think the full moon very much says like, yeah, sure, but you need to have a secure home base. Like, what is happening? What drives you? What makes you feel secure, basically, right? Like, how can you have more peace and calm in your house so that when you go out in the world, you can be more successful and achieve more? So the full moon in the 4th can definitely suggest like needing to restructure things at home, maybe even declutter, throw some things out, have some serious conversations. You may experience changes in the family where a family member is getting over a health issue, or maybe you're welcoming a new family member. The ruler being Saturn in the 6th house very much suggests that like topics of health are involved. So maybe, you know, like I said, I'm gonna wait for this to pass. Like a parent or a family member getting over a health issue. 6th house also represents like burdens and problem solving. So maybe you're completing some kind of project in the home that felt a little bit burdensome and challenging. And once again, I can sort of see this being about like home, but also family too. And perhaps comfort, perhaps also realizing that kind of, I think with like Saturn in the 6th house and a general feeling of being overwhelmed, overloaded, having to handle a lot of responsibilities, the full moon in the 4th could also be an invitation to like set something aside and spend some time at home and, you know, relax a little bit and like unwind potentially. And so also like using this full moon to build yourself a sanctuary, a happier home, a secure home base could also be quite likely. Mercury in your 4th at the time of the full moon sextiles Mars in the 8th, which could suggest that there is some kind of financial support, maybe family members, maybe an inheritance you're receiving, or just like kind of a better flow in terms of healing resources available to you, and maybe even clarity in terms of understanding what might be taking up your time and energy and sort of needing to release some things again. Let me know how this resonates. Do you notice something? Did something happen in January that is now coming full circle? And if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. For the beautiful Scorpio risings, the full moon occurs in your 3rd house and completes a chapter started in January 2024 when we had the new moon in Capricorn. So this feels like a change surrounding your schedule, surrounding your siblings, neighbors, community, communication. The ruler is Saturn in the 5th. So Saturn being in the 5th really calls you to take responsibility for, you know, your parenthood, your child maybe it calls you to take responsibility for your like creative child, something you're working on, something you're dedicating on. And so the full moon in the 3rd could be very much like, okay, what needs to change in the way you communicate? Which boundaries do you need to set with your siblings or your extended family? You know, like how do you need where are you maybe lacking clarity? Where do you need to be more decisive and more sort of direct? There is a sextile between Mercury in the 3rd, communication Mercury and Mars in the 7th, right? So I need to be more decisive. I need to be more clear. I need to be more direct and bold in terms of telling people what you want and what you need, right? If you are the pregnant Scorpio rising, like there are a few of you, maybe it's about, you know, telling your family that you need some space or you need some support, right? Like you can't be the beacon of light for them and not have them reciprocate that for you, especially if you need them. For whatever reason, you don't have to be pregnant, but like, you know, for any other reason. 3rd house could also represent that you need to create better structures in your life. If you're working on a creative project, maybe you need to reorganize. Maybe you need to release some kind of commitment, right? Or maybe you need to get more serious. Like maybe you need to invest in some kind of technology or set an hour every day aside in order to complete the project you're working on. So some type of restructuring is due, I think, whether it means in your communication, whether it means in your writing project, your creative project, or your relationships. Please let me know how this resonates, and if you're curious to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Now for the lovely Sagittarius rising, the full moon happens in your 2nd house, with the ruler being Saturn in the 4th. What kind of debts are you paying off? Are there any sort of mortgage related concerns, any sort of family related things that you need to address, right? Second house represents money and values, and the full moon always is a sign of completion, transformation, change. Something is ripening in terms of finances and resources, and somehow it's connected to, but also values, and somehow it's connected to home, family, living situation, family, childhood, right? So let's talk about it in more depth, right? First of all, take a look back at January 2024 when we had the new moon in Capricorn. Right now it's the full moon in Capricorn, which is a completion of that chapter. So with the full moon in the second, you're maybe paying off a debt. Since the ruler is Saturn in the fourth, maybe it's a debt to a family member, maybe it's a mortgage payment that you're making, maybe it's your last mortgage payment. Maybe it's the payment dedicated towards renovating your home, or maybe you're spending money in on buying a home or helping family financially somehow. The full moon in the second house can also suggest that your values are changing and you are maybe transforming your relationship to money, or just transforming your relationship to even transforming your relationship to family, right? With the ruler once again being Saturn in the fourth house. Perhaps you are learning to put better boundaries in place. Maybe you're learning to create sort of different relationships with family members and communicating with more honesty and clarity. Mercury is in your second house. It also sextiles Mars in the sixth at the time of the full moon, which might suggest that you're perhaps expressing what you want at work and maybe asking for more money, asking for a raise, maybe making some professional changes as well. Yeah, for sure. I can see this as a professional transformation, some type of resources shifting because you either are getting the reward, recognition, and raise you've been waiting for, or maybe you're letting go of a job that's been feeling draining and overwhelming so that you have a better balance. And so, of course, that will also, I think, be connected to internal changes, right? So even if it's not because of family, because let's say you want to spend more time with family, but then it's likely because you want more comfort and security in your life. And so Saturn in the fourth house is really calling you to become more self-reliant, to become more sort of self-contained on some level. Please let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. If you are a Capricorn rising, there's a full moon in your first house with the ruler being Saturn in the third house. The full moon in the first is the time of major change, completion, transformation that got started in January 2024 when we had a new moon in Capricorn. So take a look back. But the change is connected to you, your body, your identity, your answer to the question of who are you. And this is a lot of things, right? Maybe you've been exercising and training for a marathon, and around this time of this full moon, you look at yourself and you feel proud for the progress you've made, or you run that marathon and you feel strong and accomplished. Maybe it's your call to get stronger and to sort of address your diet and work on yourself, right? Maybe you're moving, maybe you're changing where you live. With the Saturn being in the third house, changes to the neighborhood are quite likely. And so maybe you were saying, I'm a New Yorker, and now you're saying, I'm from Michigan or something like that. Completing a personal project is also quite likely, and that might be a lot of different things, right? Once again, for someone, it could be about exercising. For someone, maybe it's a career goal. Maybe you're finishing writing your personal story. Once again, Saturn in the third house suggests that you're in this place of sort of serious thinking, investing in education, investing into writing. And so the full moon in the first is very much a transformation of who you are based on that, right? If you've been thinking seriously about your background or your inner monologue and you've been working on changing that will manifest externally, likely, right? Maybe you're more cheerful, maybe you're you started talking to yourself better, and you started eating better, and you started smiling more. And so it's like a personal kind of celebration of the work that you've done. Maybe you're, maybe you're completing a writing project that you've been doing. Maybe you're graduating or finishing some kind of course of study. That's also a possibility. Changes to your body because of pregnancy, changes because of some kind of, health issue that you're overcoming are also all possible here. And Mercury in the first house sextiles Mars in the fifth house, which also to me suggests that the changes you're undergoing are tied to you feeling more happy, more joyful, more full of life. For some, it's definitely feeling like pregnancy. But even if it's not a literal pregnancy, it could be about a new relationship, a new passion project that you're investing into, maybe a childlike sense of joy you've recently discovered, or your relationship with children in your life that is helping you feel more yourself, more aligned. Let me know how this resonates. If you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. If you are an Aquarius rising, there's a full moon in your 12th house with the ruler Saturn in the second house. So it's funny. Someone just recently asked me, are Aquarius risings meant to be broke forever? And that's not true, but Saturn in the second house can definitely be like restrictive. When Saturn was in my second house, I had to deal with like a 20% pay decrease almost. It was like a little bit more complicated than that, but I didn't experience a decrease, but I didn't experience a raise while I was very much owed one. Let's not go too deeply into it. But Saturn in the second house can definitely create a sense of like maybe less money coming in, maybe, a sort of like a place that's taking your money, like if you just got a mortgage or something. It's also potentially encouraging you to learn to be more self-reliant. So where does the full moon come in, right? The full moon is happening in your 12th house, which is all about self-defeating tendencies, negative self-talk, health, healing, mental health. And it completes the chapter started in January 2024 when we had the new moon in Capricorn. And so I think it invites you to find peace in spiritual pursuits. It might invite you to focus on things you can control versus things that you cannot. It may encourage you to connect with nature and meditate and journal and pray or do therapy, whatever you can in order to make your life better, right? Like it can also very much connect to releasing self-defeating habits or becoming more clear. And it could be about money, but it can also be just like a general sense of well-being. So I think if you have been too kind of focused on resources or lack of thereof, or feeling like things are unfair, you're not getting compensated enough, the full moon in the 12th can very much be about like transforming the negative talk, and also learning to control the things you can, or like learning to find support, sort of spiritual support in the times of difficulty, in the times of crisis. And maybe support comes from your home and your family. Maybe maybe there are things that are going on that feel good, even if it's not every single one of them. And the family piece comes from the fact that Mercury in your 12th house at the time of the full moon is sextiling Mars in the 4th house. So yeah, I think there is kind of an invitation to find peace and comfort in spirituality, and also maybe think about making money from spiritual pursuits, from like healing work, especially if you've been feeling like you're a little bit lost in terms of what you're trying to do, or even taking a step outside of yourself and your personal concerns and thinking of how your gifts can be best applied. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, AnastasiaDoesAstrology.com. And now for the beautiful Pisces rising. If you are a Pisces rising, there's a full moon in your 11th house, and it is ruled by Saturn in your 1st. So the full moon in the 11th completes the chapter started in January 2024. I just saw a little packing peanut and I was like, is that what it is? That is what it is. It's just laying on my floor. So take a look back at January, right? We had the new moon in Capricorn, and this highlights the sector of friendships, networks, community, social media, your role in the world, how the world sees you, and what effect you have on the world, as well as, how your dreams might affect the collective and things like that. So in January 2024, you may have been working on new projects, conceiving of new dreams, exploring new passions, like, maybe studying Reiki. As one Pisces rising I know is, very much involved in Reiki right now. So the full moon in the 11th could suggest the completion of the project you started, maybe getting closer to a dream that you have been investing into. There might also be changes in your friendships and your networks and your relationships. The Capricorn energy is very structured, right? Like, it's very kind of discerning. It's good at setting boundaries. So I think this full moon, if there are any changes to friendships, could suggest that you're realizing what's not serving you. And maybe it's not even about cutting out a friend or wrapping up a friendship, but maybe it's about rethinking when you go out or how you go out, how much you drink, and right, like maybe sort of transforming some habits surrounding friendships and going out and partying and stuff like that. And the full moon in the 11th can also be the time when you take responsibility and you perhaps get a chance to step up and be more visible and be more of a leader, a guide, a mentor to other people, because the ruler is Saturn in the 1st, right? Like, Saturn in the 1st is very much the time when you are going through a period of maturity. So having to play a role of like a mediator and helping other people, be that friends, be that your community, be that maybe even some family members that you're helping, is also quite likely, as well as needing to take responsibility, I think, for your relationships and your engagements, and which ones are helpful, which ones are worth investing into. And that is friendships, dreams, pursuits, community sort of involvements, right? And which ones maybe you need to let go of, because if things feel too heavy and burdensome and overwhelming, this full moon can also invite you to, maybe you need to go out a little less. Maybe you need to prioritize friendships that are more supportive and healing and one-on-one sort of smaller connections right now. Doesn't have to be permanent, but is likely to be necessary. Mercury in your 11th house also sextiles Mars in the 3rd, which could suggest kind of decisive conversations, action that involves, once again, siblings, friends, neighbors. And yeah, like, I think like more forward momentum in terms of following dreams, interacting with people, taking on a different role in the community are all possibilities here. Let me know how this resonates, and if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. And this is it. This wraps up the full moon in Capricorn video. Thank you for watching. If you're a Pisces rising, you're likely still here. I think that's how it works. Show your support if you haven't yet. Please subscribe, watch another one of my videos, and I will talk to you very, very soon. Bye.